I want to thank everyone for joining us again for another interview. We're joined by Robert Nordlander from Greensboro today. Robert, tell us a little bit about how you got started as a CPA with your firm.
I started my CPA firm about 9 months ago. I spent the first decade of my career after college being a CPA for a small public accounting firm. And after that, I left and taught for a couple of years and then started working for the IRS criminal investigations, doing criminal tax investigations as well as money laundering investigations for about 20 years. After about 20 years of that, I decided to pull the plug and retire and just start my own CPA firm, literally outside of in my house. So this is where it's all started. It's a nice little part-time gig that I've been working on.
Awesome. And how have you been finding your clients over the last 9 months?
For the most part, my niche is literally unique than the most of accounting firms. My niche is forensic accounting and tax resolution. Forensic accounting is accounting that's used in court to prove damages, to prove that one partner is stealing from another, to prove where the money came from, or where the money went to. That's what I did for 20 years with the IRS criminal side. So it was a good transition into the private sector with the skill set that I learned with the IRS. So all my clients so far, I say 95% of them have come from attorneys who have a need for someone to look at some financial statements, find out where the money come from, where the money go to, and then articulate it to a court, a jury, a judge about what I discovered. So that's where I'm getting most of my clients is from just people that I know or who know somebody else. It's all about referrals.
Okay, interesting. I'm sure you must have come across some wild cases in your time.
It's interesting. Yep, I've had we used accounting, forensic accounting actually, to solve a teenager's murder because the adoptive parents were using her as a cash cow because the state would give them money for the adoption. And ultimately they beat her and killed her and then buried her and then ultimately still getting the benefits from the government, various government agencies. And we would be able to walk in there and say, this child never lived there. Here's the proof. Here's the money they got. It's identity theft because they're using the child's identity to still get benefits even after the child was dead. So yeah, there's some cool stories. If anybody's interested in it, it's called the case of Erica Parsons, E-R-I-C-A, Parsons. And unfortunately, I think she was maybe past 14 years old. But there are some interesting cases using accounting in order to solve crimes.
Wow, that's crazy. So what are some of the hurdles you faced being on your own in the last 9 months? Obviously, starting your business during COVID, it's not an easy feat. So if you can elaborate on that, that'd be great.
Sure. With COVID, it's not to me that different than anything else. My business comes from referrals. And so it's based upon your network of people who know you, trust you, and are willing to hire you to do the job. And in this particular situation, I do not do compilations, reviews, or audits. I'm very limited in the number of tax returns that I do. It's really focusing on where the money comes from, where the money go to, and help attorneys and their clients articulate the damages, the problems, or even the defense. It could be a situation where I'm working for the defense where there's an allegation and we're helping trying to refute that. So it's not that difficult. The only issue I have is this, your sphere of influence with the IRS is very limited just because who I dealt with for 20 years were attorneys. And because federal tax is a niche when it comes to criminal investigations, there's only a handful of them. There's only a handful of cases out there. So my sphere of influence, my network is small, but it's enough to keep myself busy. But it's not enough to run a firm full time just yet. But it's getting there.
Okay, very interesting. And like, what are some of the, I guess, like challenges or some of the things you maybe learned along the way in the last 9 months that you didn't think you would maybe run into when starting your own firm?
Um, how slow the court system is. Someone may ask you to work on something, and you say, "Yeah," and here's my bill, or here's the rates that I have. Oh, we'll get to you. Well, you got to get the records. Well, they had to go to court to get the records, so 2 months down the road. So it's not like here's my books and records. Fill out a tax return. It's we didn't get the records, then give it to you, and then someone may in court try to quash it, which extends it even longer. So your lead time in your revenue stream is always further on down the line, maybe 1 or 2 months, 3 months down the line. It's not immediately where in your CPA firm, client comes in, they bring in their bank statements, they bring their stuff in, they bring in a check, you do the work. You get kind of paid real quick. In this situation, you may have to wait to earn the revenue at the point because you don't have all the records yet. And that would be one thing. Another thing is in forensic accounting, it's sort of unique where many times there are no books and records. So you have to recreate them, or the books and records are such a mess they can't be worth looking at because there's someone's hiding something, so therefore you expect it to be misleading. We'll put it that way. How's that? So you have to get software in order to run the credit card statements or run the bank statements through to put it into a spreadsheet format in order to upload it into some type of accounting software that you can manipulate and work on and make sense out of it. So it's sort of unique because we're going straight from the source documents and not coming from a client who already has maybe a bookkeeper or some bank statements and checks automatically there, some type of accounting system there.
Okay, very interesting. I just wasn't even aware of like how in depth that could be, and that you're going into court and solving some crimes with the work you're doing. It's really cool.
It's a unique skill set in accounting. In my opinion, it's not complicated. You just have to have the experience of doing it. A lot of CPA firms consider themselves forensic accountants. In my opinion, they're not very good at it, just because they don't do it full time. In order to be good as a forensic accountant, you need to do this for a long period of time, know how to do this, be efficient with your time, know exactly what the courts want, what they need, what the standard is. In criminal court, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil court, it's preponderance of the evidence. Two different standards. And you can't take one standard and go to criminal court and say, oh yeah, the evidence is in the box over there somewhere. That doesn't work because you got to have someone be on the witness stand going, we went through everything and here's line by line by line by line the problem. You can't just point to a box and say it's in there because the jury and the judge want to know exactly what you're talking about and be able to look at it in the spreadsheet format. So it's sort of unique. I'll give you another example of the difference between criminal and civil work. The burden of proof on the IRS is proof beyond a reasonable doubt in court. So the burden shifts from the taxpayer to the government. The government has to prove its case. In a civil issue, the IRS can come in and say, do you have a receipt for that? If you don't have a receipt for that, they can deny the deduction. Like cash, ATM and cash withdrawals. They can automatically assume it's personal because you didn't have a receipt for it. It flips over to the government has a burden of proof to prove that that wasn't a business expense, that was a personal expense. Well, how do you want to prove that this is a personal expenditure, not a business expenditure? And it's very difficult. So you have to look at the bigger picture and show various things, but there's ways to do it. But the point being is that the burden of proof shifts, and a good forensic accountant understands that it shifts from one area to another and has to be able to literally pare down the case down to its bare bones so that even someone with a high school diploma can understand what's going on versus because your audience is your jury and a judge who do not have accounting experience, who pay return preparers, a couple $100 to do their own tax returns. How do you expect them to understand everything? They're not. So you have to dumb it down and be able to articulate it to the point where even someone with a high school diploma understands what you're talking about. And that can also be kind of interesting to tell that story.
Yeah, no kidding. And Robert, do you work with clients nationwide, or are you restricted to just North Carolina?
Right now, most of my clients are coming from North Carolina just because my sphere of influence is there. But I have at least had one client that was in another state altogether that was referred to me. So it just depends. But right now, it's in North Carolina just because my network's in North Carolina. It doesn't mean I can't do it other places. It's just that people who know me right now, the majority of people who know me are in this area.
Okay, got it. And do you have a presence online for new people to find you, or are you just solely relying on referrals? So you don't feel like you need as much of a social presence online?
I was told, and it's probably very true, that a web presence is necessary. It doesn't get you clients, but it can lose you clients. So if you don't have a good web presence, people will think, well, you know what you're talking about, or it's a stinky web presence. They're going to think that your quality of work is equal to your web page, which you don't want. Majority of people, if they say, hey, I got a good accountant, good CPA, forensic accountant who can help you. His name is Robert Nordlander. What's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to go to the Google. They're going to put your name in and find out who you're about, and then hopefully find your webpage to find out more about you. And that's where they're either sold or not sold. So my clients have all come from referrals.
Okay. Awesome.
But it's very important to have a good web presence just because people don't take you seriously if you don't have one.
Yep.
In my opinion.
For sure. Now, you mentioned this is kind of part-time. You can only take on so much work at a time. What does like max capacity look like for you? How many cases or like jobs can you be working on at one time before you reach capacity?
I guess it depends on how you define capacity, but I will tell you this much. As a self-employed individual who has retired from the government, and I do get some type of pension from the government, it's no longer about the money per se, but what interests me.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So if something's interesting to me, I will work on it. If I need to scale and get more people, I do have a Rolodex of people that I have worked with who have retired, or people that I trust quite a bit, who have the capability to take what I need and understand what I need and do the work. They specialize in forensic accounting as well, so they're able to do that. So I can scale as necessary. At this point in time, I haven't had any clients to need to scale, but if I do get one, I could scale pretty quickly if necessary. So I would dare say if I'm getting 20 hours a week worth of work that's necessary, that's full capacity for me, because you can't bill for 40 hours. It's almost impossible. But to have 20 billable hours a week is to me good enough.
Okay, awesome. And what advice do you have for anyone who's either looking to get started in their own business or get started and get their feet wet in forensic accounting?
Whoa, forensic accounting. This is a niche in the accounting world. If someone's going to ask me for my opinion, and I'll make a short plug for this, I have a podcast that I've had for at least a year. It's been downloaded in over 1,000 cities in over 100 countries. It's called the Fraud Fighter Podcast. And this podcast was created because I had the same question that you're asking me, but I did not know what people do in the private sector. I knew what I did as a criminal investigator, but I did not know what people did taking that same skill set in the private sector. I had no idea. So I started a podcast to ask these questions. Who is hiring? What credentials are needed? Because you can't just show up in court and say, I'm a professional, listen to me, because the judge won't sit there and say, well, what makes you a professional? You got to have the right initials by your name. You got to have the right experience. So I interviewed people who either are cutting the check for the forensic accountant, or who are issuing the credentials, saying, hey, get these credentials and they can help you be a forensic accountant. or the people that actually are in the game who actually are doing the work. Okay, so those are my three main people. So when I interviewed them, I interviewed people in the bankruptcy courts because sometimes people defraud the bankruptcy courts. I've interviewed defense attorneys. I've interviewed a best-selling author about anti-money laundering and fraud involving that, cryptocurrency. There's a lot of things that's available out there, but that would be my first step to say, hey, I don't have a corner in the market. I can only recommend to you what people have told me, and it does work. For example, a bankruptcy trustee, a person who's in charge of administering the dissolution of a business, and he thinks there's some nefarious stuff going on. He needs to know who he can trust. Well, the only person he can know he can trust is someone who's out there willing to introduce himself, shake his hand, and maybe even do a presentation. And so most of my marketing is based upon word of mouth, as well as I do presentations for free and sometimes for pay for various agencies, whether it's a CPA association, attorneys. I do quite a bit of presentations in front of attorneys going, this is what you need to know if you need to hire a forensic accountant. This is what's going on in tax world. This is what's going on in the cryptocurrency world. And so that's how I market myself. And that's the best way I can tell someone who wants to be in the forensic accounting world is probably to get your CFE, which is Certified Fraud Examiner. That's the very basic. If you have a CPA license, that's great. CPA license sales better, because everybody knows what it is. It's automatically trustworthy. A judge knows what it is. A jury knows what it is. No one misunderstands what the CPA is. They don't know what they do, but they understand the initials are important, and they show that you have some type of competency. But a certified fraud examiner is probably more in line with a forensic accountant than a CPA license. But the CPA license sells, is my point. Can you do this without CPA license in the CFE? Yes, you can do that. But it's going to be very hard to sell yourself in court because you've got to have these credentials behind you in order to get the attention of the judge and have them approve you to be on the witness stand to give your opinion. So that's how it works. But I would listen to the podcast and then also get your CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner credential. At the very least, if you can't get to have a CPA license, get that too.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. So, and then last question for you, Robert, where can people find you? I'll put all of your information in the description. We can even put your podcast link in there, but if people are looking to work with you, they want to get in touch with you, do you have a number or website or even email address we can pass on to the audience?
The best way to get a hold of me is nordlandercpa.com, Nordlander CPA.com. That's the best way to get in touch with me. It's got my contact information in there as well if somebody wants to talk to me. Second thing they can do is if they're interested in the forensic accounting world, about the credentials, who's hiring, what's out there for me type of thing, then the Fraud Fighter podcast would be the best way to show you how to get into this industry is through that podcast, because I interview quite a bit of people and I'll give someone at least an idea of where to go and how to market themselves.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate you opening up and sharing those stories, Robert. It was really great to meet you and have you on. Do you have any last comments or any last things you want to share before we wrap this up?
No, accounting is a great profession. It's a very trustworthy profession. You think of used car salesmen, you think of attorneys, people have a bad connotation, or a politician, they don't think it. But when accounting, typically people have a very positive outlook toward the industry, as well as like pharmacists, doctor, people have a pretty good high rating, trustworthiness. So it's easy to make money in accounting. You just have to go out there and market yourself, and there's plenty of work out there. Plenty of work out there.
Awesome. Well,
it's a great career.
We love working with accountants, so I'm glad you shared that. Perfect. So we'll wrap this up then until the next interview. Again, I want to thank you for your time, Robert, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good luck.